What comes to mind when you think of California? Probably Hollywood, the Golden Gate Bridge, the beautiful beaches, insufferable celebrities, housing prices that will make you want to rip your eyes out. However, there's another part of California that is rarely mentioned. The Central Valley of California is actually the largest agricultural producer in the entire United States. But how come an area in a state that's known for not having any water and being very dry is so desirable for farming? Well, that story dates back centuries. And just so you know, the area I'm standing in right now used to be the largest lake west of the Mississippi River. Now that lake is gone. What happened to that lake? Well, I'm here to explore that today. So, let me tell you the story of Lake Tulare. To understand the history of Lake Tulare, we need to go way back in time. Over 600,000 years back in time, when a lake called Lake Corcoran covered the Central Valley of California. Alright, so there used to be a big-ass lake here. I'm talking massive. But that bad boy ain't here no more. This lake was even bigger than Lake Tulare and covered the entire Central Valley of California. I found a really cool educational film from the 1940s that does a way better job explaining it than I ever could.
A long time ago, this whole area was a great gulf, an arm of the Pacific Ocean. Many swift streams flowed into it from the surrounding mountains. Rushing mountain streams like this carried millions of tons of earth down into the Gulf. Now, all that is left of the old Gulf is San Francisco Bay. After countless thousands of years, the great Central Valley was formed.
Scientists think around 600,000 years ago, this giant-ass lake overflowed into the Carquinez Strait, which makes up the modern San Francisco Bay, catastrophically draining the lake. This thing was about the size of Lake Michigan. And for my non-American viewers, Lake Michigan is a big-ass lake. This left behind several smaller lakes, including Lake Tulare. At its peak, Lake Tulare was the 9th largest lake in the United States. For thousands of years prior to European colonization, the area was inhabited by several Native American tribes that relied on the lake as a life source. In fact, it was likely one of the densest population centers north of Mexico pre-1492. The area surrounding the lake was mostly inhabited by the Wowal, Chunut, and Tachi peoples. I really hope I pronounced those right. They lived here for thousands of years before European settlers began exploring the lake in 1805. The settlers' attitudes toward the natives became increasingly aggressive as the years passed. One Spanish explorer named Luis Antonio Martinez destroyed the native village of Bubal along the lake. This is the beginning of the displacement of thousands of indigenous peoples. You're probably wondering what happened to the lake and why isn't it here today? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about. It's a series of foolish decisions and greed that still impact us to this day. So, let me tell you the story of Lake Tulare. Unlike the fate of the lake that preceded it, this loss had a lot more to do with human intervention than nature. The destruction of Tulare Lake started in the late 1800s. After settlers moved into the area, they purposely dried up the lake to start farming crops. This was only the beginning of the destruction of the area that is Tulare Lake. In comes one of the most successful farming families in American history, the Boswell family. The Boswells were cotton farmers that moved from Georgia to California. The founder of the company, James Griffin Boswell, heard about the fertile soil in California's Central Valley. I couldn't find a picture of Mr. Boswell, so here's a random film about a farmer from the 1960s.
Cows are a lot like people.
He went to the Central Valley and started his farming business in Corcoran, California. Why is this area so desirable for farming? Well, it has rich soil, a very desirable climate, and it has a sophisticated irrigation system where you can easily pull water. When James Boswell died in 1952, the company was inherited by his nephew, James Griffin Boswell II. He grew the acreage more than 3 times its original size, making it more than 200,000 acres. In fact, Boswell and other King County farmers convinced the federal government to dam the 4 rivers that led into Tulare Lake. 4 dams were built in the Tulare Lake Basin, stopping water flow to the lake. They saw the rivers as only agents of floods that would destroy the future of the American West. Starting in the 1940s, one by one, they dammed the rivers that led into Tulare Lake. The irrigated farms of Tulare Lake could grow as big as they liked. The once abundant lake that sat in the center of California was now gone. The American farmer had become a giant. No longer does he serve the land serves him. I really wish I had come up with that quote on my own because it's really cool, but it's from a 1960s film called The Big Land. Tulare Lake has flooded in 1942, 1969, 1983, 1997, 1998, and 2023. During California's gold rush in the 1800s, the state had 5 million acres of wetlands. Over 60 million birds would stop to feed or spend the winter in a string of lakes from Kern County to Sacramento. But within only a century, there were only 300,000 acres left, and fewer than 2.5 million birds. Multiple plants had been killed off by cattle and sheep. The entire land was remade just so some people could make a buck. And the nation's biggest farmer was one of the main culprits. Most of California's Central Valley looks like this. What you see behind me, just plants, crops. It's all farmland out here now. The lake is no more. But recently, a lot of flooding has happened due to storms in California, and Lake Tulare is resurging.
California's record rain has put one of the most important places in America for our food supply at risk. And also, it brought back a lake not seen in generations.
A series of atmospheric rivers last year led to the reemergence of Tulare Lake as waters flooded into the basin, putting vast swaths of farmland underwater.
And all of those atmospheric river storms pummeled the area and saturated the basin's soil, and floods have damaged towns and deluged farms and have begun to refill what was once a sprawling lake. So this will have a ripple effect on the nation's food supply chain and leave farm workers without income for an undetermined amount of time.
I really wish there wasn't a swarm of bees here because it is pretty, but let's go to the next destination. My window is just covered in bugs, so that's what you get when you drive out here. As of March 2024, the water in the Lake Tulare bed has begun to recede. The lake is drying up yet again, but if we look at history, it is likely that it will flood again, and one day it may never go away. So as you can see behind me, this is one of the flooded areas out here where Lake Tulare is trying to make a comeback. Not good for the farmers, maybe good for planet Earth. One of the last natives who lived in Tulare Lake was named Yoimut. She was forcibly removed by American settlers. All her life she wanted to go back to Tulare Lake. But as we know, Tulare Lake as she knew it was destroyed. She once said, "Will Tulare Lake ever fill up again? I got only one thing to say. It will fill up full and everybody living down there will have to go away. I'd like to see that time myself." Yoimut died in 1937. So, all of what you see behind me is kind of the reason why there's no longer a lake here anymore. Crops. Crops led to the demise of Tulare Lake. And yeah, that's it. This whole area was a giant basin where water was, a giant lake. And that's why flooding is happening because, well, the lake is kind of getting a comeback whenever there's a storm. If it wasn't for human intervention, the lake would likely still be here today. So it's really strange to think, what would this area be like? What would California be like if its largest industry just never happened? What would this area be like today? It's really interesting, especially with all the flooding that's been happening here. Is Lake Tulare going to make a comeback? I really want to know what you think in the comments below. What do you think should happen with this area? What would you like to see? But anyways, I'm going to check out for now, and hope you enjoyed this adventure, and I will see you next time.